We all know the story. Humanity stands on the brink of extinction, beset on all sides by traitors, mutants, heretics, and xenos. The Imperium of Man split in twain by the Cicatrix Maledictum. But that is not the subject of our focus today. No. Our attention will be focused on one realm of man in particular, the Moebian Domain, and its struggle against the Darktide. In order to better understand this conflict, we must first examine where it started. Most recently flaring back up in the onset of the 41st millennium, but possibly dating all the way back to the days of the Great Crusade, we find a series of pacification and suppression campaigns known collectively as the Fringe Wars. Named as such due to their locations among the western and northern fringe regions of the Moebian Domain. The northern front in particular being a site of particularly bloody carnage. The details of this band of Xenos and Chaos threats, known as the Darktide, are limited in nature. This was a strange development, but the Moebian Administratum, whether it be through arrogance, the desire to keep public morale up, or possibly both, have intentionally kept the general populace of the worlds within ignorant to the details of what is faced and what occurs. This secrecy has resulted in the Darktide being treated more as a boogeyman rather than an existential threat. Both in the general public and in the freshly raised regiments recruited from said populace. At least until the men and women of said regiments are faced with the cold, hard steel of reality. And such an arrangement surely wouldn't cause any future problems. Spoiler alert, it does. Unfortunately, further details on the various Fringe campaigns are limited, but we do have a couple known conflicts, including the Trident campaign, the Thunderbolt Offensive, Loxby, the Battle on the Red Moon Carrara, the low point of the Ulk Station Massacre, and the Nox Alpha campaign, where the seeds of heresy would be sown amongst the Moebian Sixth. As the hellbound tour of duty on Nox Alpha draws to a close, the Moebian Sixth, under the command of Captain Byron Wolfer, would return to Atoma Prime under the guise of a typical resupply run. However, either by pure coincidence or carefully coordinated timing, their arrival within the Atoman hives coincided with a Dreg uprising. Though we cannot say for certain, it is likely that the cult of Admonition had usurped the water cartel in HL 1866, the Torrent, at this point. The Moebian Sixth, as this uprising progresses, would split themselves into two groups. One would proceed to HL 943 Coldiron Stack to collect water rations for the next campaign. The other would aid in the quarantine efforts in the lower hives. Or so the Loyalists were led to believe. For once the Moebian Sixth were in a suitable position, they would strike. Group 1 would quickly secure Caldironstack, controlling the glacial water supply and its distribution infrastructure, where they would spread the blight to nearby districts. And as part of the Blitz, they would send a train full of blight and explosives hurtling into the Chasm Station concourse, spreading the blight further via unsuspecting civilians within the station and the subsequent tightly packed hab blocks. This resulting in the Sixth's control of Chasm Logistratum and a significant amount of Tertium's railways. Loyalist response would be swift, but easily dealt with via a loaded train full of poxwalkers. Those guardsmen who would not be killed by the careening train would soon be overwhelmed, though not everything would go according to the traitor's plans. As Captain Wolfer would be captured by Arbitrator Extraction Squad E0K127 and taken aboard the Tancred Bastion. Was Wolfer's capture planned, or was it an unfortunate turn of events? We may never know. One thing is for certain. It did not take the Moebian Sixth long to find the Tancred Bastion, nor did it take them long to board the ship and break Wolfer out, quickly overwhelming the guards with a poxburster and well-timed shots. In the midst of the chaos, Augustine Zola is nearly killed, but is then luckily saved by a loyalist convict, who, in a gesture of gratitude, is offered a chance at redemption by fighting in Inquisitor Grendel's warband. An offer that would eventually go out to every convict aboard the Tancred Bastion, even as Wolfer eventually takes center stage as the proposed main instigator and arch-heretic. Now, before we go any further, I would like to say that the exact chronological order of these missions is unknown at the time, nor are the operation names canon. They are simply my way of categorizing missions. Kill one random heretic, changes nothing. Kill 1,000 heretics, brings a small, but that's about it. Kill the right one, and it brings their operations to a screaming halt for a bit. Operation Cut 'em Down is simple enough. The Moebian Sixth control the railways, but that is an advantage the warband could turn against them. With a bit of foolery in the auto-scheduling, warband strike teams have been able to ambush traitor captains all across Chasm Terminus. Now, ideally, this would result in the heretic leadership being crippled. However, results have been less than pleasing. Ammo and water are needed to fight a war, so guess which one the heretics decided to go for. Some of the only remaining water sources in all of Tertium have come under siege by heretic forces, in the hopes of spreading the blight even further. Efforts have been halted by the timely intervention of Grendel's warband, but the back and forth has continued for a long while. As the great ancient Terran strategist Sun Tzu once said, all warfare is based on deception. And that is precisely why the rejects are down in the torrent. for the Ragged King's Cogitator Array is a prime vector for spreading false intel into the Heretic Battle Network. Though Operation False Truth seems to have been a success, we cannot say for certain whether the recent sporadic actions of the traitors were through successful operations or the interference of Admonition. As if in response to Operation Cut 'em Down, Heretic leadership has taken to fortifying former Enforcer stations all across the lower hives, turning said stations into private bolt holes. Ironic or what? But the overall mission was the same. Cut down Heretic leadership and watch the body thrash as a result. So the mission was still the same, albeit a little more straightforward. Break down the front door, kill anything that moves, and get out. Whether this has had more success, we cannot say. New variants of the Blight have begun to spread. So, in a near desperate attempt to try and curb the spread, strike teams would be sent into the quarantined Hab Draco to quickly study samples of the new contagions, allowing Magos Karib to create a blessed unguent of shriving, through which the phage tree of Hab Laranex would be destroyed. That is, until a new one grows somewhere else. In their growing arrogance, Heretic forces have become quite careless in managing their supply lines, leaving entire shipments of ammunition vulnerable in scattered dockyards throughout the hive. A mistake the Warband has been all too keen to take advantage of. For when one is low on supplies, you would be a fool not to accept such a gift, or ignore such an opportunity. While the dregs have made use of Enforcer stations, trade centers, and institutions across the hive, the Scabs, or the Moebian Sixth, have chosen the Carnival as their personal fortress, under the direct authority of Wulfar's top lieutenants, Roden and Rinda Karnak. And it is through the Carnival that a series of performance-enhancing stims are being circulated throughout the hive. A production network the Warband has no hope of stopping entirely. But that has not stopped them from enacting efforts to hamper production, such as equipment sabotage and sample retrieval. Though this is not met without resistance, with the Karnak twins in particular dealing with several strike teams personally. The Karnak twins, Wulfar, everything was tying together, at least according to Zola. This was a lead she could not afford to pass up. And so, without any authorization, she would go on to launch the Orthus Offensive, where a single strike team would head back down to the Carnival in hopes of capturing one of the twins for questioning. However, this operation would not go unnoticed, as Interrogator Rannick would quickly intervene. And it was made immediately clear that the twins knew of the plot. But Zola insisted on continuing the mission, which led to her immediate replacement as Rannick attempted to salvage the situation. First, hoping to extract the team before any disaster could take place. When no transport could be secured, the mission parameters were changed from capture to assassination. And though the twins were waiting for the rejects, the mission would go on to be an unqualified success, for Roden would be laid low in the prison where they fought. As for Rinda, on the other hand, she would go on to survive and become the Herald of Admonition. The war would find itself expanding into the upper levels of Throneside. And with it, new questions would be asked. How far did the heresy go? Was Wulfa in league with anyone? Did he have an ally? A boss? Answers would be sought, and secrets would be shared within the battlefields of Throneside. Fortunately, shifting battlefronts had opened up access to the Archivum Sycorax, where strike teams were able to have a look around for any information that could be found on said ally. Meanwhile, a groundside comsplex dish would be made frequent use of. Whether this was battle reports, operational lists, or even more secretive inquisitorial business, we may never know. What we do know is that transmitting via the Morningstar was too great of a risk, for there was a traitor on board. There were other operations that weren't sanctioned by Grendel. One such mission was Commodore Halouette's Payday operation, where she would borrow an inquisitorial strike team to acquire a shipment of prismata crystals. Melk would immediately try to intervene, but would agree to keep silent in exchange for a 20% cut of the profits. Though word would soon get out of the operation anyway. But similar operations would be carried out in the future, with even the likes of Sephany running a mission or two. Even as new fronts opened up, others intensified. One example being the weaponization of cargo train RTX 590, which the heretics turned into a tox bomb and sent careening into Barbican Gate Terminus, where the Moebian 53rd was staging at. The 53rd would not have enough time to respond to such an attack, and so an inquisitorial strike team was sent to stop the train. Fighting throughout the rail would be intense, but the mission would ultimately prove successful, securing not only the survival of the Moebian 53rd, but the respect of its chief commissar, Duquesne, who would shortly after enlist said strike team for a mission into the Excise Vaults, where she and Knight Commander Dragor would oversee their progress in obtaining new samples of the Blight for study, along with coordinates for a heretic bastion in the Forbidden Wastes. The bastion would soon find itself under threat. For a coordinated assault between Grendel's warband and the Moebian 53rd would be launched, with strike teams directly supported by Knight Commander Dragor and his command tank Lionheart. Though Dragor would end up quite frustrated at missing out on all the glory due to the tank being too big to fit through the gate. An unfortunate development indeed. I think that poor man needs a hug. The question was still being asked. Who was Wulfr's ally? But the answer would soon reveal itself, for Admonition would be discovered at the onset of the Dark Communion. For one of the three would be heard conversing with Wulfr. Though, I suppose the more proper term would be raging? For the captain's efforts to stop the rejects were continuously met with failure, much to the three's growing frustration. Though I suppose part of that can be attributed to her direct interference in his command, revealing the cracks that have been forming in Wulfr's authority. But damage was already beginning to show, for the Cathedrum of Messalina Vengeant was corrupted beyond salvation, and the rite of rebirth was well on its way. Almost complete even. Almost, but not enough. For despite all the efforts to kill the four-man strike team, soldiers lay dead, dregs lay slaughtered, and every last ritualist was laid low among the wreckage of the blighted stims that supported it. Surely this was it, right? Surely the end was upon them now. If one were to truly think that, then they would be a fool. For Admonition was still at large. They were simply allowed to wallow in their victory for a time. For the war still goes on. The battle for the heart of Atoma still rages. And the fronts have expanded. From the sandy wastes of Deadside, where heretic and loyalist forces fight for control of tech remnants, to the sand-blasted facilities of the Hourglass. The war continues. Even as the forces of the Adeptus Arbites and the gangs of Hive Tertium join the battle, the deadlock remains. This cannot last. The call has been made, and much to Hadron's approval, a new player is about to join the game.